CMMS Radio talks about all things CMMS, computerized maintenance management software, focused on maintenance management. It's the people, the process, and the culture that make your CMMS journey a success. I want you to meet Tobias Pforr. He is Global Business Development with Hexagon EAM. We recorded this at the Streamline Asset Management User Conference in Greenville, South Carolina. Something really interesting comes up in here as it relates to AI. We also talk a lot about adding value. So let's just jump into it. Hope you enjoy the episode.
Tackle everything kind of from a strategic perspective. Like also when we met, like talked about like value generation and things like that. So ultimately for me, organization is an organized way of creating value of some sorts, like either making something more efficient, making something more productive. So ultimately you have to create value that you can sell. Now coming back to the point of condition monitoring, you want to of course ensure that your facility or your assets create as much value as possible, or you have much uptime. So I tackle it or would tackle it from a strategic perspective, like what is it you need or you want to have, and how do you get there? And so that comes to the condition monitoring, all the sensing. I also see a lot of people, they create data lakes, or they say like data is the new oil, so they want to just like collect as much as possible,
right,
and then afterwards like see what they can actually make out of it. Turns out a lot of companies realize they just have a lot of garbage sitting in data lakes. So it just basically like takes up a lot of space on their servers, on their like hard drives and everything. You sit on that data, but they weren't really specifically like mindful about it, like what they needed. So I think that comes back to the strategy, knowing your value generation, knowing also your critical assets, knowing your critical like markers that you need to like look out for.
Mm-hmm.
So if they then start, like your condition starts deviating, you want to know those markers and be able to like say early on when does it start deviating, so that you can then counteract it or like react early enough so that there is no critical failure and your whole value generation actually falls short.
So would it be fair to say then, in your view, right, and you know, maybe we don't have to be experts on any of that, but more about big picture versus what we're focusing on now. So if you have a more reliable environment, or you're already moving very well with your asset management strategy in EAM, and your team, your people, your processes working well, that's when to then look at, can we benefit from sensor monitoring? But we must focus in on and understand very well ahead of time, what data do we want? Why do we want it? Why is it value? So you've got that value add.
Exactly. I mean, you can also look at it from a risk management perspective. So you would want to know like which risks are there, what's the probability of them like happening, and what's their impact. So once you know that along your value stream or value generation, that's where you actually want to like monitor those risks, so that you are like very specific about it. Because with electronics, it's often about like signal to noise ratio.
Mm-hmm.
So only because you collect more data doesn't mean you get more signal. Most of the time you might actually get more noise.
And that's
so that is ultimately things also that you have to filter out. And I'm a person, like I get easily distracted when things are cluttered. Like I'm also very like visual, so I like it like very neat and clean. Mm. And I think it's the same also for strategy. I mean, Michael Porter said like the essence of strategy is defining what not to do. So I think that comes back to your question of like, what should you monitor? I would flip it around and say like, what should you not monitor?
Oh, I like that. I remember someone was talking to me about something, and they said, this is a little bit different, but something about, well, what do you want? And then when somebody says, well, I'm not sure, they would say, well, how about this? What do you not want?
Exactly.
And you start to see what you couldn't see. And I think that's really important that you said that. That's a really great takeaway, I think, that kind of summarizes how you have a better opportunity to do this right. Mm-hmm. And because when we do these endeavors, right, when somebody's already using EAM and they're going to go to a next level of, you know, moving towards improvement, and they want to do good data, usable data, that has to be strategic, so that you don't waste the time, the money, and the resources that go into such a project. Because right. You might not find out that you didn't really want any of that until much further down the line. And I think there's also a tendency, I think, and I'm going to ask you, to overcomplicate things and forget about the basics, the fundamentals that we all like to make sure are there first. Because if you go too far, you start creating efficiencies on top of ineffective and completely unnecessary things. Mm-hmm. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. I think also what struck me here at the conference, a lot of people were talking about the basics. Mm-hmm. I mean, they said it over and over again. They also felt kind of like dumb sharing that, like get the basics right. But I think that's the basics, like to get it right from the start, to know like what you want to look for. And I mean, the term of lean management popped up in my brain when you started talking about waste. So yeah. I mean, the principle behind lean is to eliminate waste. So I think early on to say in your value generation, what are the things that are irrelevant, and to just like to cross them out from the beginning. So that way you just declutter your environment so that the relevant things remain, and those are then the things that you can focus on.
Yeah, it also reminds me of just the general concept of doing too much. You can't do too much because it's not possible to do everything. So the more things you're doing, the less you're actually accomplishing. And then we can talk about the idea of multitasking, which is terrible. It doesn't work. You do two things at once. You're doing them both at a lesser degree of effectiveness and all that. So that's all fascinating. I have kind of an interesting question for you. We were talking a little bit about that you ski. And when you were talking about like being visual, the whole time I was thinking about you attacking a hill, and mm-hmm. how there's so much visual elements to that, while you've got the mechanics and the mm-hmm. cognition all happening at once. So do you think those viewpoints and how you kind of move through the world impact or influence your way of being able to understand maintenance environments and why basics first play such a critical role? And by the way, I think the reason we constantly talk about it is that's where it should start, because you can't backfill it. It's really hard to do.
Yeah.
But does that type of the things you like to do, and you're skiing down a hill, do you think that kind of relates a lot to how you view maintenance and best practices?
It's actually a very interesting question, because what just comes to my mind, I mean, you saw also that I broke my thumb. Yeah. From skiing. It's called a ski thumb. So yeah, that to that. But I remember a time when I skied, it was actually last year in the winter, and we had a bit of snowfall. There was a little bit of like fog, and the visibility wasn't that great. And at first that challenged me very much, because I tried to like see where I'm going. Mm-hmm. So I tried to see the bumps, I tried to see like what I'm going for, and I realized I'm skiing very badly. Mm-hmm. Like, trying to avoid things, and then some things came up that I didn't expect, so it was quite bumpy. And then all of a sudden I said like, screwed, let's just ski. Mm. So I tried to like force myself to not pay too much attention to what I'm seeing, right? But more attention to actually what I'm feeling and my intuition. And all of a sudden, the skiing became much smoother. So that was a very interesting experience for me, to not overemphasize the visual, but there's a lot of other senses actually that you have that you can use. And I think also, coming back to the business world, we do see a lot. But we also have a gut feeling. Mm-hmm. We also have intuition. Like, we hear things, or we, perceive things, like where we're like, wait a second, what is that? So, yeah, I think there's definitely something to go after.
Yes, that's awesome, because there's all this concern about AI and cobots and robots and all this, but that's that human element. And when you talk to enough maintenance people, maintenance and reliability professionals, other people that are, really, they've been in and around asset management, they've done plant turnarounds, invariably what you'll hear about is the value of that technician or even an operator that can kind of pay attention to things. They have an awareness of things that, machines aren't yet able to do. Programmatic algorithms aren't really quite able to do. Maybe someday, I don't know, who knows. But I think that intuition, to intuit what in fact you are perceiving and make value out of it through your practice experience. And, now I know that sound or that feeling or that temperature or something just a little bit off, that can give you really great clues. It's almost like a human being a sensor monitor.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, I had a discussion about AI with my wife like a couple of weeks ago, and where like a lot of things are like blowing up, and like you're like hear about it is like becoming more and more a buzzword, and everything is like AI here and AI there. And she was like kind of like concerned about it, like what is this doing to our world? And I said like, look, it's actually in a sense, I compared it to convenience food. It's like it's convenient. Like you just go to the store, you get a package, you just pop it in the microwave, you eat it. But is it really good food? Is that only because there is like convenience food that you shouldn't know about nutrition, that you shouldn't know about like ingredients, that you shouldn't know how to cook? Because if you do, you can be so much more mindful. And I said like it's a choice. It's like if you take convenience food, it has, I would say, a negative impact on your creativity, in a sense. Like food for me is like it's like art. I love it, like to play with the senses.
You're
cook.
You're engaged, you're intentional,
Right.
but you're also kind of available for what's about to happen, like the whole comprehensive experience, and you're paying attention to
Exactly.
the health benefits or lack thereof. Oh, I'd love to have that, but I'm gonna have a lot less of that one,
Right.
as opposed to the convenience food. It's quick, we can keep moving, but it's dangerous because we get into that not thinking about those things, and it's all processed, which has got a lot of stuff in it that's not good for us.
Absolutely. And so I'm a hobby chef. I love cooking. I live in Europe, and I mean we have tremendous amounts of like good food, like in different countries. And for me, I can tell like when I'm stressed, because then I cook less. So when I'm off, it's often like I love being creative. Like when we're on vacation, like I love cooking. So that's for me like also a really good sign, like when I'm relaxed and when I'm not.
Yeah.
So all that part of like relaxation, of being mindful of crafting something, is something that I'm missing out on if I choose convenience food. And I think it's the same thing also with AI. Like you become less mindful about what you're doing because you're just pushing things over to AI. And I said like, bold question, but like, is it AI or is it unique dumbness?
Can I steal that for the future
Absolutely,
use?
go ahead.
Because I've got a really good friend of mine, and he's really an expert on condition monitoring. He really understands maintenance and reliability. His name's Matt Knuth. I always say you'll always get the truth with Matthew Knuth. And we talk about this concept of actual intelligence. He prefers actual intelligence over artificial intelligence until we get to a point where it's built with great intention and there's real value in what it's doing, rather than thinking for us.
Absolutely. I mean, and the core AI is about like recognizing pattern. Like that's something we also constantly do. Like when we see something that looks like a spider, even though it isn't, like we react to it because we recognize a pattern.
Yes.
AI does pretty much the same. It's like in the stream, coming back to it, and you might hear that from me over and over again, like the value creation. Like over time, like in the industrial age, like you had different stages of automation because you try to like with less input create more output.
Yeah.
AI for me is nothing else than another step of automation, but you have to be mindful about it. It doesn't mean because there is a tool that it can solve everything. So you have to be very mindful about like what problem is it you want to solve with this tool, and you can also solve like what's the problem that's actually solvable with it. Like and I like to, I mean, we talked about reality capture also, like
Yeah, I was about to ask about that.
what we do there. And I often said to my customers, look, it might sound counterintuitive, but I'm focusing on disqualifying customers. So I want to first find out that you're actually not my customer. And they're like, what do you mean? I was like, well, I want to know that your problem is solved, not necessarily that my product is sold. Because if I sell you something, you're not happy with it, I not only get your things back, I get other people's stuff back. So I want to be mindful about your time and my time. And if I figure out for you that this is not the right tool to solve your problem, you might be thankful. And they appreciated that. And I compared it often to like, hey, look, you can also get a screw into the wall with a hammer. It does work. Is it beautiful?
No.
Not necessarily. So that's for me also the whole discussion about like AI and where are you like creating value about it. But I think also talking about innovation, like we need to allow experiments. Like we need to try things out. Like, you know, humanity is all about like creating tools. So we create tools to solve problems. Mm-hmm. So we have to also then figure out like, hey, how does that hammer actually like, what weight does it need? Like, how long is the handle? Like, how do I, like, you know, and I think we're at that stage with AI that we find ways that we can actually like automate more things. Mm-hmm. And now we also need to like play back and forth, like, can we automate this? Can we automate that? And learn with it and fail with it as well.
Yeah, and failing with it, it reminds me of, you were also talking about this where I always say the idea behind set it and forget it, we have to maintain the things we're using to do our maintenance, to do our asset management. And we have to be, I think, quite rigid about that, because any deference, now certainly things come up, but any deference can cause things to start to change. And now that data or whatever it might be lacks the integrity it once had. Mm-hmm. And that creates risks, creates all kinds of things, false positives, you know, right. All of those things. So that has to be watched. But when we talk specifically about reality capture, what just quickly and succinctly so that folks know what that really is, can you give us a little snapshot?
So sure, absolutely. Just one last thought on the previous point, like before I forget it, like we talked a lot about like getting the basics right. And mm-hmm. we also talked about like, you know, over measuring things. Actually, Peter from CERN, like in his session yesterday, he talked again about the basics.
Yep.
And his point was like, it's better to have no data than wrong data. So where he actually observed that a lot of people like put in just like something, the first point from the drop-down menu because they weren't mindful about it, they just want to get it done.
Right, right.
So you have then, you think like you have all the data you need, but it's actually wrong data. So it gives you a complete wrong picture of your organization, and it's rather better to say, I don't have that data, let's find it out, than later have to clean it out. But yeah, talking about reality capture, I mean, first off, what is it? It's basically, as the words say, capturing reality. And reality for us is like 3D space. So reality capture is often used in as-built documentation. So in constructions, you want to get a snapshot in 3D of what was built. You take millions of data points, like we measure distances basically with a laser scanner, mm-hmm. And also combined like other technologies to capture that space and be able to measure it. That often helps then to document things, to check things, like it's used for like floor level analysis, it's used for clash detection. You can throw in planning models and see like how far actually are you on target with what you're building. There's a lot of like documentation in existing buildings. So like facility management, you know, you buy a building, you need to like remodel it. Where do you start? You need good data to actually plan. So that's where reality capture comes in. You can scan that environment, get a 3D representation, and then you can start working with that, create models out of it as like a planning.
And that would be both internal, including the things that are located somewhere, the equipment assets, et cetera, and then also external, like the building envelope, but also you could go further out. Can it do that?
Well, absolutely. I mean, but Hexagon, like we have tech that helps in manufacturing, like to measure sub-millimeter accuracy. So it's like laser trackers where you see like a car body, like how was it like built, like are the tolerances like in your range?
Yeah.
Then we have like millimeter accuracy laser scanners. We have like long range laser scanners. We even have laser scanners and cameras that you can pack on a car and drive through a city. And we even have like airborne laser scanners combined also with oblique cameras. So you fly over a city and map it. So it's all about like mapping the actual environment so that you have a basis to plan.
And it's highly accurate, and that's what's so advantageous about our overall advancements in technology in the first place. And then that goes back to literally everything we already said. When they were building that, they had to be very intentional, understand the right data so that we're building this right and it actually is within the tolerances and highly accurate.
Absolutely.
I see a lot of value in all that. I want to ask one other kind of closeout question. With these technologies, so somebody's an EAM client, they've got, pretty good use consistently, they've got buy-in from frontline workforce, they're getting the right metrics and KPIs department by department, even for the C-suite. For this technology, do you think looking at that and considering, if someone's considering that they need that next level, what kind of maintenance maturity do you think they need to have? And let's consider maybe there's 5 levels, and like a level 3 would be someone that's fairly advanced and they're ready to really go to that next step, more towards these incredibly more detailed types of things. What do you think on that? Do they need to be careful with, hey, that's not a place to start, or hey, if you're here, this is when you might look at that? Could you give us a little something there?
That's a very good question. Like what I learned throughout the last year is like you have to be, again, mindful about like who's using tools in the operations. So what we see with laser scanning, it's primarily used from like surveyors or engineers that need accurate data for planning. Like, when you have to remodel an office or a shop floor and you need to see like what fits where, like you need to have accurate data to do that. Now, when it comes to facility management, I would argue that that data would be noise for them because it's way too much. Like it does not have any, or presumably much relevant information for them that would help them do their job better. However, what we found, there's actually 3 value points with reality capture. One is visualization. So you have like really like an accurate 3D visualization of your environment. You can use it for planning, modeling, simulations, things like that. What I figured out is actually there's 2 other very important value points that cater more to the facility management folks, and that is localization and contextualization. What I mean with that is like localization is all of a sudden you have a 3D map. Now with that map, you can enrich it, you can place information in that, like where are your assets actually in 3D.
Yeah.
Now, the third point with the contextualization, the accuracy comes back into play, that we have dimension. So now all of a sudden like, do I need the short ladder or do I need the long ladder to actually get to that asset once I know where it is? So you can be very, very mindful like about doing your maintenance work because you can prepare for it. You can think about it beforehand. And
yes.
So I think that's where I would argue you don't need to be that advanced in the scale of like your maintenance maturity. But I think knowing that there's tools out there that can make your work easier already like at a low level is very, very beneficial.
Yeah, I'm thinking if you have large facilities and you need to go and see before you come back and get the things that comprise your kit, you could do that from where you gather the kit of the ladder, the proper tools, or whatever other safety equipment you need to go and work on this particular asset, because now you have this available at the ready.
Exactly.
That saves time, that reduces waste. And when we talk about maintenance overall, asset management, everything is really about waste elimination. So now we've come full circle and we're all the way back to the basics. And that's where I think people have to keep that in mind when they're listening to this great episode. Tobias, I appreciate you doing this, man. We waited until like the last day and we finally got it done. I want to thank you for being on CMMSradio, and I can't wait to see you again, maybe out on the trade show circuit. Maybe we'll see you at Hexagon Live, maybe not. Maybe we'll see you here again next year in Greenville.
Yeah, looking forward to that. Thank you again for having me.
It was an absolute pleasure, man. Thank you.
Did you find this episode helpful? Please send us some feedback, suggest a topic, or ask a question. Reach out to CMMS Radio if you need a co-pilot on your CMMS project. Visit CMMSradio.com and use the What's on Your Mind link. Thank you for tuning in to CMMS Radio, your resource for all things CMMS, from selection to implementation, to help you make better choices, learn from industry experts, and have a successful CMMS journey.